Hi, welcome everybody to our webinar this morning. So I'm going to go through some introductions and then we're going to get started. So my name is Karen. I'm going to be facilitating our webinar today, and I do have two staff members behind the scene who are going to be helping me out if we encounter any technical problems. Matthew and Shava will be chatting with you as well through the chat pod. If you have any difficulties, just let them know and they will help you. If you're having any problems with sound right now, hopefully you can hear me. If not, you're probably already chatting someone to ask about that. All right, well, welcome to our first of 6 webinars this week. We're hoping to get people excited and started for back to school. We know that some schools are getting ready to start next week, whereas others still have a couple of weeks of summer to go. But we want to get everybody started with some exciting webinars. So this is our Getting Started with Hands-on Learning, Introduction to Engineering Education. And our goal for this morning's webinar is to explore some of the benefits of exposing young students to engineering education. So looking at that preschool realm all the way up to about 6th grade and thinking about what are the benefits of engaging in engineering experiences at that young age. Before we jump into some of the content, I want to go over just some of the logistics of our Adobe Connect classroom, so that way if you have any questions, you can get in touch with us easily. The first thing is we are going to ask you at different points to change your participant status, especially after we watch a video, so we know if the video has finished buffering and playing on your end. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to, there's a little man at the top of the screen. You're going to go up to the little man and basically click on that arrow next to him and you'll get a drop-down menu. You're going to select the status you would like to show, and then it's going to change that little man to whatever the status is. So in this case, I changed to the agree status. So if I can just ask everybody to give that a try. So if you can just go up to that little man, change to agree so we know that you are following along and not having any problems. Perfect. All right. Other things, hopefully you've already seen it. There's the speaker icon up there as well. Hopefully yours is green and playing. You might not have the other 2 white icons, and that's okay because we're not going to be using our mics or our webcams today. All right. Let's see if everybody can now remove their agree status. So you've already done agree. Let's see if you guys can clear it as well. Go back and change that. Great. Wonderful. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about this morning is I want to ask you, what are some skills or behaviors you want your students to improve in this upcoming year? You know, you finished your last year of school and you've probably spent a little bit of time this summer reflecting on where you want to go with your students this year. So what are these skills or behaviors you're thinking about improving with your students? Okay, so I'm going to think about that for a second. And we're going to move into another layout. And in this layout, we're setting up a word cloud for you. And what I want you to do is once the word cloud is set up, you're going to place the answers to that question into the word cloud. And we're going to get a chance to see what some commonalities are between things that we're looking to work with our students on this year. So you can put it right into the little chat pod on the bottom of this. I'm going to give people a second. Oh, great. I like a lot of thinking and collaboration. I see teamwork and collaboration, nice and big, becoming problem solvers, having confidence in their skills and their engineering. So definitely looking at what you guys are putting in and looking at our word cloud as it's developing. We've got a lot, like I said, collaboration and thinking seem to be the biggest ones. And thinking is going along with critical thinking, problem-solving thinking, being someone who can, look at something differently. And hopefully with all this thinking, they're also asking some questions. being independent learners. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to download this word cloud, and we're going to come back to it later at the end of this webinar, so we'll have a chance to see it again. So as we wait for Matthew and Shava to download that for us, I'm going to, let's see, we're going to just move our slide forward. And we're going to be talking about technology and engineering because both of them are key when you're introducing engineering to elementary students. So, okay, so our word cloud is downloaded, so let's move on. So when we introduce, when we think about engineering, we have to also think about technology. So I'm curious to wonder, what do you think about when you hear the word technology? What comes to mind when you hear this word? And also maybe what comes to mind when your students think about the word technology? We might have a different definition than our students. So you can answer for both. You can answer for what comes to mind when you think about the word technology, and what comes to mind when your students think about the word technology. Frustration, yes. I could definitely agree with that. When you need the technology to work the most, that's when it decides it's not going to. But definitely I'm seeing a lot of computers, internet, improvement, new inventions, a tool, something in the real world. Definitely your students will think about iPads, anything iPhones, upgrades, yep, things that are man-made, advancements, wonderful. So I like this. This is a great place to start when we're discussing technology and technology in the classroom, and especially what our students think about when they hear the word technology. So I'm going to move us again to another layout where we're going to take a deeper look in what we consider technology here at Engineering as Elementary. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of play a little virtual game or a virtual activity, and this is a preparatory lesson that we like to call Tech in a Bag. Sorry. And here's my bag. And what I want you to do, when I progress to the next slide, what I want you to do is I want you to select one of the items that came out of my bag. So I have a couple of different technologies in my bag right now. When I click to the next slide, you're going to select one technology to keep in mind as we move forward. And as soon as you've selected your technology, you're going to change your participant status to agree. Okay? So here are my technologies. I have a paperclip, a toothpick, a pencil, and a spoon, all in that bag. So once you have selected the item or the technology that you're going to focus on for the next couple of questions, I want you to change your status to agree. So I know that you have secretly selected something. Okay. All right, I see most people have selected. Wonderful. So keep that technology in mind as we go forward. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you're just going to answer them in your head. So kind of keep track of them as we go. So I want you to think about your technology, one of those 4 items I showed you. Is your technology something that is natural or human-made? Think about the answer for that. You don't have to write it down, just kind of keep it in mind. What material is your technology made out of? Is it made out of metal, wood, plastic, or maybe something completely different that I haven't listed here? Okay? So that technology you started with, what material is it made out of? But then also thinking about, could we make that technology out of a different type of material? Right? There's lots of options of materials out there that we have access to. So what are some other materials you might be able to make your technology out of? And what problem does your item solve? Or what problem does your technology solve? And I have 4 options here. So does it attach papers together? Did you ever think about that as a problem? Does it help you eat without a mess? Does it help you pick food from teeth? Or does it help you write things down? So these are all problems that we don't think of as being really huge problems, but they are problems that we do face, and the technologies that were in our bag, some of them solve these problems. how else could it be used? So if your technology could solve one of the problems on this list, can you think of ways that we can possibly use it to solve any of these other problems on the list? Thinking about that. Okay. Now our last question, I'm going to actually have you guys answer. All of these items we talked about, we now have a poll, and I want you to answer this question. When I asked you at the beginning what you think of when you hear the word technology, and you listed a lot of computers and iPads, things that plug into the wall that are electric, maybe something that you're using right now to engage in this webinar. But the items that I gave you in our bag, Tech in a Bag, are these technologies as well. So this is just a yes or no. And it looks like, when I broadcast all our results, it looks like everybody pretty much agrees that these are technologies. But the real question is, why now? Why do we think that all of these things that we were just looking at that were in my bag are considered a technology? And to do that, to come up with this why, I think we should develop a definition. We should think about, what does technology mean? Think about the questions that I asked you as we went through this short activity. I asked you, what materials is your technology made out of, or your item is made out of? What problems does it solve? Can it solve any other problems? Can it be made out of different materials? And does the material itself affect the problem it solves? So these are a lot of things I want you to think about as we come up with our own definition. So in this new pod here, you're only going to be able to respond once. So just keep that in mind when you do respond. If you respond a second time, your response will be lost. But you can always add on to your response by adding a comma or a period and just extending the thought. So in this new chat pod, I want you to think about, what are some things we might apply to a technology definition. We had to describe technology, combining both the technologies you mentioned at the beginning when we thought about what we think of when we hear the word technology, and add in what we now have thought about with the different materials that were in our bag. Oh, I see a lot of people are really focusing in on, it helps us to solve a problem or make our life easier. Oh, I like it. Somebody even used the word designed. When we think about something that's designed, what do we usually think about? We usually think, oh, somebody even included something that's human designed. So somebody has sat down and thought about the problem and has thought about, how can I come up with a solution to solve this problem? And they have to pay attention to the materials they're using. They have to pay attention to the problem in general. Okay, so it looks like, if we look at everybody's definition together, I feel like we've all come up with a very similar understanding, which is wonderful. So I'm going to share with you EIE's definition of technology. This is the one that we use when we think about coming up with engineering activities for students. So we really focus on the human-made aspect, anything that is human-made that is used to solve a problem or fulfill a desire. That's something that we didn't really address. We just really talked about solving problems. But when it comes to fulfilling a desire, you know, there's other things out there. Maybe my iPod doesn't so much solve a problem, but fulfill a desire of, I want to listen to music when I'm running. But then again, maybe that is a problem too, because I'd be running without music. We also like to categorize technology into a couple of groups. So we consider a technology can be an object, a system, or a process. The way we differentiate these is, an object is something that is made of one material or one piece. A system is when you have more than one piece working together to solve a problem. So a very basic system would be a sticky note. You have a piece of paper and a little bit of adhesive, and together they solve the problem of losing your notes. You know, you can stick them somewhere and retrieve them when you're done. Whereas if they were two separate items, you would just have a pile of paper and a pile of adhesive. So they work together as a system. And then a process would be a step-by-step set of directions that you would follow to solve a problem. So a basic one that we like to talk about with students is tying your shoe. If you don't tie your shoe, you might trip over your shoelaces or your shoes might fall off. And to tie your shoe, you do need to follow a step-by-step process or procedure. Otherwise, it doesn't work correctly. So now that we have a definition of technology, I want us to think a little bit more about engineering. So we have this common understanding now that technology is something that is designed to solve a problem or fulfill a desire. And so let's talk a little bit more about what is engineering and how it's connected to technology. So let's think about a plastic spoon. I have a plastic spoon. And, you know, I know it's a little late in the season for me to be growing anything in my garden or planting anything in my garden, but I've decided that I want to dig a large hole in my backyard and plant a tree, and being that I live in an apartment, all I have is a spoon. So I want us to think about this spoon, and I want you to give me some recommendations on what changes we can make to the spoon to, you know, improve its design so I will be more successful in digging the hole to plant my tree. So what are some things you might want to change about my spoon? You can put that in the chat pod on the bottom. And as we offer some suggestions, Shava is going to draw on our image of a spoon here to kind of give us an understanding of what we're thinking about. All right, so changing the material, I think that's a great idea. What material would you recommend changing it into? And why don't, steel, okay. So let's change it to metal or steel. And why, though, would I not want it to be plastic? Okay, metal, it's stronger. It's stronger. Can you imagine how many plastic spoons I might have to go through? Easy to break as plastic, great. How many plastic spoons I might have to go through if I was to dig the hole with just my plastic spoons? I probably would go through the whole box of 100. All right, so by changing the metal so it's steel, or changing the material so it's steel, that would definitely be one way. It looks like somebody also recommended let's enlarge the scoop. Oh, Erin, I like the idea of giving me a handle. That means I can really grasp it. That would definitely be very helpful. Lisa, a motor. You're really getting creative. So if I add a motor to my spoon, I can just sit back and watch my spoon dig the hole for me. I like that idea a lot. So I still have my spoon. So you guys have helped me enlarge the handle. Enlarge the scoop, given it a little handle, changed it to metal, but it's still the size of a spoon. What else might I want to change? I see some answers coming in, so I'm going to give people a chance to respond. Make the handle larger, so I can get my hand around it, and make the whole thing bigger. If we extend out the handle, the lever piece of it, make it bigger so that way I don't have to bend over while I'm digging my tree. I'll end up with a bad back at the end of this, and that's not the experience I want. I want a tree so I can sit in the shade during these hot days. Great. All right, so all of these changes that we did to our spoon, we were thinking like engineers. We were engaging in a process that engineers engage in thinking about what the problem we have is. And my problem was I wanted to dig a hole for my plants. And I had a spoon that I was using, but it wasn't appropriately designed for my problem. So you helped me apply some different design aspects to it. And some of the things we thought about was some math. We made a larger handle. We made a larger bowl or enlarged the end of it. We didn't talk about a pointed end, but we definitely talked about changing the entire thing into metal. In this case, we also sometimes have people recommend having the handle be made out of wood. The reason for this is I don't know if I can lift a giant metal spoon, and if it's part of it is made out of wood, it does make it a little easier for me to lift it. And the last thing, so we applied some math, some science, ergonomics, making the handle longer so that way I don't have to bend over. Great. All right, so thank you for helping me re-engineer my spoon. I probably should just go out and buy a shovel. That would make my life easier. But thinking about the spoon and changing it gave us an opportunity to practice our engineering skills. So I want to share with you a definition of an engineer. So this is a person who uses his or her knowledge of materials and their properties, science and math, and their creativity to design new technologies or improve existing ones. So thinking about solving the problem, thinking critically, and going back to the word cloud that you guys started with, these are things that you really want your students to practice. Being able to think outside the box, come up with solutions, and be critical thinkers. And so engineering is a great opportunity for them to do this. So EIE, we actually define engineering as a process, and it's very similar to what an engineer's definition is. So engineering is a process that uses one's creativity, understanding of materials, math and science, and the engineering design process to design technologies or improve existing ones. Okay, so the engineering design process is one thing we haven't talked about yet, and I will show you some examples of that later on, but it's a way that engineers approach a problem. It's how they ask questions and gather information before they start to create and come up with their plan. So they go through a process where they gather some information first so they can make good decisions. All right, so we'll get to the engineering design process a little later, but I do want to share with you some thoughts. I want to share with you some thoughts on what an engineer looks like. So I have a couple pictures here, and I'm going to ask you to draw on this in a second. So these are some images, and I want you to think about what your students might say an engineer looks like. You might have a different definition from your students, but of these 4 pictures, I want you to circle the image of what your students are most likely to pick. Okay. We have one person, there we go. And if you are unsure to write on this, you just need to grab the little marker icon on the top. Great, so it seems like a lot of people are going with the man in the top left corner. Some people are also going with the woman on the right. Wonderful, thank you. So we definitely are noticing that most of us are thinking our students are going to choose the adults in this case. They're going to choose the adults over the children, and a lot of them might even choose the male over the female in this image. And that's something interesting to think about. So we'll come back again to these pictures, but I want us to think about the benefits. So now that we know what our students might think, I want us to talk about why engineering is important. And for engineering is elementary, at the beginning of the development of what we have in 2003, one of the first things we did was we actually asked students to draw pictures of engineers so we can get a better understanding of what they actually see an engineer looking like, or what they think an engineer does. So I have some of those pictures here that I want to share with you. So in this case, this student feels that engineers build buildings, and you can see this is Alex's house, and that might be Alex there building it with a sword and a screwdriver. In this image, we have an engineer building bridges and roads. This engineer also is holding a screwdriver, but is looking at some blueprints or some plans for that bridge. Engineers fix cars, engines, and machines. Well, it looks like in this case, this drawing, this person is actually fixing the engine of the car. So this was another example of what students think. Engineers use or fix computers. And engineers drive trains. So as you can see from students' understanding of engineers, it might be a little narrow. You might have noticed that all of those pictures I showed you were men, or I mean, they were stick figures in cases, but they did look like men. And they all seemed to be working on things, you know, building things, constructing things. And in the last case, the engineer was driving a train. And that is correct. Engineers do drive trains, not the engineer that we were asking them to draw a picture of, but definitely still an engineer. So what we saw in this activity with the students was that students saw engineers as technicians and mechanics. And they didn't understand that engineers are designers that have a chance to be creative and apply their knowledge of math and science. So they really, like I said, had a very narrow understanding of what engineering was, and they didn't see engineers doing things outside of maybe civic, you know, building bridges, roads, things like that. And like I said, in most cases, the drawings were of men. The pictures that we did receive from students that were of women, usually it was because that student had an engineer in their life who happened to be a woman. So it was very interesting to come out of the pictures was if they were exposed to an engineer, they usually drew a picture of the engineer they were exposed to. If not, they drew more of this engineer as a technician or a mechanic. And this is really important when it comes to offering students access to the field of engineering and opening them up to career opportunities. It's really important for them to know and understand that engineers can look like them and can do things that, you know, are creative. So those pictures gave us a great starting point when we were first developing our curriculum. Some additional benefits of engineering are they help to build your science and math skills. How many times do you hear your students say, why do I need to learn this? Or when you ask them to do science in math class or math in science class, they'll tell you, no, we can't do that. That's a different class. So engineering is an opportunity to bridge those two subjects and to also pull in some of the other subjects as well to demonstrate and to give the kids a chance to actually apply what they're learning. Another great benefit of engineering is classroom equity. So one of the things we focus on at EIE is really giving the kids a chance to understand what technology is, work with the materials that they're going to be doing, learn together as a group so that way there's equity in the knowledge that they're gaining. So when they move into the design challenge, they all are bringing the same information to the table and they all have an equal chance of success. So we do like to think about that when we are focusing on what some of the benefits of engineering are. They also allow the kids to practice their 21st century skills. You guys all mentioned critical thinking and collaboration in that first word cloud. Those are some skills, those are those softer skills that students need to practice and they need to have to move into the workforce as adults. And engineering is a great place for them to work on them. Career success as well, like I said, this opens the door to many options. All students that engage in engineering might not go on to the field of engineering, but it gives them that opportunity to think about it when they are deciding on their careers in the future. And it allows them to become an engaged citizen. Engineering problems are real-world, authentic problems, and it gives them an opportunity to be part of the larger community and to feel that collective, citizenship. So just to give you a little bit more information about what EIE is for some of you who might not know, just so that way you know what I'm talking about with Engineering is Elementary, but also to let you know overall a lot of what I'm saying is not just in our curriculum. I think it's in a lot of engineering activities. So these are benefits no matter what you're doing. So EIE is research-based, we're standards-driven, and we're classroom tested. That means we did a lot of research beforehand. I showed you some of that with our pictures. Standards-driven, we really did focus in on what are the science content areas that elementary students focus in on, and how can we support those science contents by developing an engineering curriculum that utilizes that science. And all of our curriculum is classroom tested. We do go out into schools and pilot test everything we do at least twice, in some cases more than that, to get it right. So that way when you're doing it, your students feel comfortable and confident. And also you feel comfortable and confident. So our mission is to support educators and children with curricula and professional development that develop engineering literacy. So some of these additional benefits, and like I said, this comes from our curriculum, but this also comes from a lot of just doing engineering with your students. So one of the benefits is students begin to see themselves as engineers. So in Engineering is Elementary, we do have some storybook characters where we use that as a narrative to engage the students in the process. And the storybook characters look like them, act like them, have similar problems that they might have, and approach those problems in ways that the students can also approach the problems. So engaging in engineering activities that allow students to see themselves as engineers is really important to help them persist through the challenges and hopefully succeed in their engineering design. Another thing is students can see themselves as engineers by allowing them to use common everyday materials in the design challenges. If they think that engineers can only use materials that an engineer can access, that removes access to engineering for the students. Whereas if you allow them to use things like craft sticks, foil, straws, and erasers, this broadens their understanding and broadens their ability to engage in engineering. So thinking about the materials that you're using in your engineering activities is important. Also, allowing the challenges to be open-ended is really important. There are multiple solutions to engineering problems, and when students can come up with multiple solutions, they can talk to each other and really discuss the trade-offs of the solutions they've come up with and learn that there's not one answer to these questions. So having activities that allow for this open-ended design challenge is really important to them so they can see that it's not just one student in the class that got the right answer. Many of them can get the right answer, and hopefully all of them can succeed in their challenge at the end. So you can see here the students are engaging in a water filters unit. So this student put sand and gravel and some cotton balls in this, but they also had access to things like screens and coffee filters and cheesecloth. And so some of the other designs utilize those materials as well. So after your students engage in an activity like these, in engineering activities, they can, let's look back at those, actually, sorry, let's backtrack a second. I do have some videos that I want to show you of students actually engaging as engineers. So this, let's see, this first video is students talking with the teacher about the students in the storybook. So going back to the storybook, I'm going to let Matthew play this video so we can observe the students and listen to their thoughts on this.
Every time you do an engineering unit in the Learning Lab, we always start with a storybook. And there's always a character who's really about your age. So you should be able to really identify with this character. His name is Suman. He's from a country called Nepal. You are way over here where that little dot is. You're in the state of Kentucky. He is almost all the way across the world. He is in a small country right here near India and China. It's called Nepal. Okay? Now I'm going to let all of you follow along in the story as I go. Chapter 1, Journey Through the Night. Suman, Bua, my father, stirred me awake. We need you. My eyes fluttered open. I lay there for a moment, not sure whether I'd been dreaming. Chapter 2, a distraction at school. What's a distraction? It could be a noise, it could be a thought, it could be something in your way. So when you see the title, A Distraction at School, what do you think this chapter is going to be about? Aubriana?
Like, Suman, he's like he's at school and he's thinking about Audrey, and he's really worried that
he's distracted, and because he's worried about Audrey. Would you be able to concentrate on your schoolwork if someone you loved was in a hospital? Chapter 4. Now look at their house. What do you notice is similar to their house compared to yours?
it has furniture in it.
They have furniture. Bella?
They have pots and pans.
Pots and pans like you have in your kitchen. Abby, what else do you see that's similar to your house?
I see kind of like
All right, so it seems like most people have gotten to the end. It looks like though some people might have lost the connection. These videos are from our website, so we definitely can we can direct you to those videos if you'd like to watch the entire video. But we are also recording this webinar currently, and we will be archiving it within the next couple of weeks, so you can also come back and watch the video here as well. So the video we just watched was the teacher was talking a little bit about one of our units evaluating a landscape. Yeah, you can't see me right now because I don't have the webcam on, sorry. So this was evaluating a landscape, and you can see how engaged the students were in the discussion around the challenge that Suman, the child in the story, was engaged in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move us now to another video layout. And while I'm there, while we're getting ready for it to play, I'm going to share a little context. So in this video, these students are talking about, well, we interviewed some students to kind of learn a little bit more about what their experience was like in the activity that they were doing, and, you know, how they feel about engineering. And we have a lot of these videos on our website, like I said, so definitely after this webinar, feel free to explore our website and observe more of our videos. All right, so I'm going to give it another second to buffer. While we're watching this video, I just want you to think about what the students are saying helps you see them seeing themselves as engineers. Okay. All right, so I'm going to mute my mic and we're going to play this.
Really cool because we haven't done anything like this. It's like it's more like a hands-on. Yeah, we're not just on paper and pencil. Yeah, and we get to like really use our imagination. And create things. I think I am an engineer. Because I learned so much about solar ovens and what happens to the environment.
This lesson has taught me so much, and I couldn't have had more fun.
All right. Read it and take it out.
The way that engineering is elementary is designed is to ensure that it's accessible to every student. Each part of EIE will get at different learners.
Before this, I didn't know that Charlie was a genius. About this topic.
I didn't know I could even say that much, learn that much.
What's this? Oh, you're not excited about it? In this class, you may not know, based on the video, that there are actually a number of students who really struggle behaviorally and academically. And they're fully engaged, leading their groups.
Okay, so this was a longer video, so this might have had a harder time playing on some of your computers. So we just grabbed the web location for the video. So if you want to just grab the link we put into the chat pod and save it for later, that would be great. Sometimes we find that depending on your network where you're currently attending from, there might be some buffering issues. So sorry about that. Definitely I recommend watching this video at a later point. For those of you who did get a chance to see the video, I was hoping maybe you can share some of your observations or your thoughts about the students in the video, and also some of your thoughts on what the teacher was saying. Yes, and Molly, I did want to address what you had written down. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Like I said, we don't currently have any plans for it, but if you do explore our website, under all of the classroom videos, we do have some reflection questions. So if you and some colleagues want to get together and create a small PLC, it's not the same as an online one. You're not getting as many voices or minds in the discussion, but you and some of your colleagues can get together, watch the videos, and then reflect on the questions. I think that would be a great use of those resources. All right, so looking at some of what you guys noticed, that all the students were actively engaged and they respected each other's strengths, that collaboration, learning that they're all supporting each other and working together is really important. They have a chance for success. They actually are stating explicitly that they are an engineer. And right, the teacher is not telling them everything. The students have a chance to engage in the problems on their own and work through them and really persevere. That's something that the students, I think, need to practice, so that way they can learn to, think critically. They have to come up with a solution to overcome the problem. Just right, the kids are super excited. They're talking about it. I love the part where the little boy mentions that he didn't realize Charlie was such a genius, and this was a great opportunity for Charlie to really shine in this experience and demonstrate some skills that maybe she hadn't had an opportunity to really show off in the past. And so it was great that students were able to respect and see what the other kids were doing together. Wonderful teamwork. Yep. So wonderful comments. I think you are right in all of those things, that engineering is just a great opportunity to build that community and give the students the confidence they need. So at the end of an experience like this, we're going to come back to our image of who we think an engineer is, or who we think an engineer looks like. So if you were to ask your students this question before an activity, they probably would have answered exactly the way you guys predicted. How do you think those students in the video we just watched, after engaging in an engineering activity, how do you think they would respond? I'm going to give you another chance to draw on this picture. I want you to add another drawing, and you can circle as many of the images as you want for this. Great, yeah. We're really hoping that hopefully the students are really knowing that they are engineers just as much as the engineers that are out in the field working on this, those that are in that career. You know, everybody in this picture is an engineer. So it's really important for our students to understand that and to see, you know, those engineering skills in themselves and have a chance to practice them. So wonderful. We have a very messy picture now, but that's perfect. That's exactly the way I wanted it. So moving on, something else you might have noticed in the video is, and you mentioned a lot of them, is the students were really, oh here, sorry, let's backtrack a second, just so I can identify who those engineers were in those pictures. So Derek Samuelson was our chemical engineer on the top picture. And then just below him, we had some chemical engineers working on improving a Play-Doh process. So we can see that we have our adult chemical engineer and our student chemical engineer. And then in the top picture on the right-hand side, we had our environmental engineer who works on permeable pavements. And then our students working on cleaning an oil spill as environmental engineers as well. So not only are they all engineers, they're engineers in similar fields as well, which is great. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in that video, and also these benefits of engineering, is thinking about what we consider here at EIE habits of mind. So what are we really looking for these students to develop? How are we looking for them to think? And so after we have videotaped so many classrooms, we started to notice a lot of these things coming out in our videos. We started to see students persisting through failure, and which is over here. We saw them communicating effectively. We saw them identifying themselves as engineers. They were constructing models and prototypes like real engineers. They were investigating the properties and uses of materials. Like I mentioned earlier, this is one of the things that we use in engineering as elementary to provide access to all students by giving them an opportunity to investigate the properties of the materials they're going to be using in their engineering activity. Really gives them all the same prior knowledge when they move into the challenge. So these are all things, considering the problems and context, envisioning multiple solutions. All of these are things that we think about when we're designing our curriculum. And they're things that you as a teacher can also use when you're trying to engage your students in engineering. You might decide that you want to maybe select a couple of these habits of mind to focus in on, during your engineering experiences, that you want to make sure that your students understand that multiple solutions is okay. There's no right answer for their engineering challenge. So this is a great way to kind of help you think about the classroom as well. So we're going to go back to our word cloud. So this is the word cloud that we created this morning. And I had asked you to think about what skills or behaviors you want your students to improve in this upcoming year. And what I want us to do is I want us to compare our word cloud to EIE's habits of mind. So the habits of mind might be a little small. I do believe you have a Zoom feature on the pod with the engineering habits of mind. Feel free to play around with that. That's not going to affect the view for anybody else except for yourself, so don't worry about it. Zoom in and take a look. And in the chat pod below, I want you to, comment on any comparisons you see between the word cloud that we developed this morning and engineering habits of mind. Mhm. Yep, that teamwork piece comes up again, working effectively in teams. The only way students are going to learn how to work effectively in teams is if they have a chance to engage in a lot of teamwork. I went to a conference about a year and a half ago for engineering education, and one of the top things I heard these college professors talking about was their engineering students didn't know how to work effectively in teams. This is something that, students just don't have the opportunity to engage in teamwork so much. So I think, by having your students work in teams, share ideas, and really see themselves as engineers allows them to practice all of these skills that they can then apply in other situations. So great. I love all of these comments you're giving. Wonderful. So the next question you probably have is, well, this is all great, but what am I supposed to do? How do I get started? There's a lot of really great options out there, and we know that engineering is really beneficial for our students to engage in. They're great opportunities for kids to have. So what do I do to get started? The first thing you need to do is you need to find an engineering challenge. And when you're selecting an engineering challenge for your students to engage in, you really need to consider, is the activity or the curriculum you're choosing appropriate for your students' grade and educational setting? Is this something that is at the right cognitive level for your students? Are you asking them to manipulate things that are just too small for their small hands? So really be attentive to the activity, and is it appropriate for your students? I'm going to share with you some of Engineering as Elementary's curriculum options, but again, there's a lot of things out there. We do have some in-school options. This fall, we're going to be putting out our We Engineer and EIE for kindergarten, which are our preschool and our kindergarten curriculum that we are currently developing. We also have our in-school Engineering as Elementary, which is appropriate for grades 1 through 5. And then we also have some out-of-school options. The difference between our in-school and our out-of-school is, while we are an engineering curriculum, our in-school curriculum does touch a little more closely on the science, whereas our out-of-school is a little more strongly just the engineering. There's also a lot less writing for the students to be doing in that setting as well. So those are things to think about. I'm just going to quickly go over what our curriculum is, but then I'm going to give you some more information on how to get started with engineering. Okay, so We is our pre-K to preschool. It's 4 challenges. The students work in groups as a whole classroom, and then they do some station work. This is going to be just 1 unit, and it's got 4 challenges in the unit. So it's kind of like a all-in-one package, which is going to be great and really helpful. Our EIE for kindergarten. Each unit has 7 lessons. It should take you about 6 to 8 instructional hours. We have 2 units that will be available this fall. We are currently also writing 2 more, so there'll be a total of 4 units for kindergarten going forward. Engineering as Elementary is our main curriculum that we started with. There are 20 units. It is written for 1st through 5th grade, and we do have tips in the units that talk about how to make it more advanced or more basic depending on what grade you're teaching. And again, this is 8 to 4 instructional hours with 4 lessons. And then our Engineering Adventures is one of our out-of-school settings. It's really cute because the students receive emails from Jacob and India, who are siblings, as they travel the world finding problems and solving them with engineering. I believe we have about 10 units available. We're still working on, I think, 1 or 2 more. The format is 6 to 10 activities, so this one does vary. It's a little less consistent across the board, but each lesson takes about 45 minutes. And then our last one is Engineering Everywhere. This is our 6th through 8th grade curriculum. And the context is set with a video. It's about 10 minutes long, and it's an engineer actually doing something in the field that the students are learning about. So this is a really great curriculum as well. So these are some of the options you have here at Engineering as Elementary, but again, engineering design challenges in general, you do want to find something that is age appropriate for your students. Something else is can introduce your students to the engineering design process, which I mentioned earlier. So we have 3 different versions of this. We have our 3-part engineering design process, which is for our We Engineer engineers. We have a 5-part one, which basically in the students explore. In the rest in EIE for kindergarten, engineering is elementary, and engineering ventures, the students ask questions, they imagine, and they begin to develop a plan. So there's a lot that happens in that explore kind of stage. Create and test and improve. And when you get to engineering everywhere, this is our 6th to 8th grade curriculum. You can see that we've also added communicate, because that's a really important part of engineering. And while that might not be in the other engineering design process images, it is there in the curriculum because it's important for the students to be able to talk about their engineering design and to share it with each other. So after you have settled on your engineering activity or your curriculum, think about how does it connect with your science topics or the standards you are teaching. You want to make sure that you are making the science and the math that you're teaching your students relevant and authentic to them. So connecting it to a design challenge is, a really nice way to do that. Another thing to think about is, can you make connections to local phenomena? So if you have a schoolyard garden, you can have your students engineer hand pollinators and talk about pollination and plant development, things like that. So making those authentic real-world connections for the students and bringing it back to their community. And the most important thing is pick a topic that excites you, especially if this is your first time engaging in an engineering challenge. Pick something that you are really excited about doing. So that way your students will kind of be infected by that excitement and it'll just be a great experience for everybody. So as we come to the end of our webinar, and you guys have been great, and hopefully this has given you guys a lot of information to get started with engineering education in your classroom, I'm going to give us a chance to ask any questions. So I do have a fresh chat pod open, so feel free to put any questions down that you might have. As you put your questions down, I'm just going to go through a couple more slides, and I will address your questions. This webinar that you're attending right now is the first of 6 that we're running this week. So if you are interested in attending more of them, you can register by going to the link below, and it actually looks like it might be live, so you could possibly click on it. And you can go there and register for the rest of them. We have a second one today on materials management. So just thinking about that overload of everything that's happening in your classroom when you bring in a project-based learning experience for your students. Tomorrow we're going to focus on integration. So if you already are familiar with engineering education and you're trying to come up with some new ideas or new ways to integrate it with ELA or math and science, but definitely come and attend those. And then on Thursday, we have 2 pedagogy-based webinars. We're going to be doing an activity where you get to practice, thinking about questioning strategies and what type of questions really help your students engage in the engineering process. And how to think like engineers is going to focus on the habits of mind a little bit more. Okay. So the link to access our archived PDs, that is actually the same link as the one here on the screen currently. We are keeping everything on that website, and then you can just go from that website to our archive links. Once you go to the archive, it's a YouTube channel. You can subscribe to it. Once we're done with the week, that's when we're going to start archiving things. So we do have 6 of them this week. So once we're done at the end of the week, they'll start the archive process. It could take about another week or so because there are so many of them. But definitely check back in about a week or so. If it's not there, you can always send us an email and we can give you an update on it. This is just some information. If you do have questions for our customer service team or our sales team, I'm going to just leave this up for a second while I look at some questions that you guys have. We currently don't have any grants available for funding. I do know that that question might be better answered by some of your peers who are also attending the webinar. And actually, as I answer these questions, I am going to push you guys out to the webinar survey because I know some of you are probably, you've gotten a lot of information out of this. So I'm pushing you out to our webinar survey. It might have opened behind your screen or in front of your screen. If it opened in front of your screen, you just minimize it and go back to it later. If it opened behind, don't forget to do it later. It's really helpful to us in planning more of these webinars in the future. Let's see. Do you have any suggestions to maintain momentum over longer periods of time? Are you talking about momentum among the teachers or momentum among the students? Because I know that both are really important. When teachers are first starting, oh, I see the rest of it, though. It seems to be you're talking about the students. Yeah, I think making a day specific basically the engineering day is really exciting for the kids. If they know that every Wednesday is Engineering Wednesday or something, while it might take a while for them to complete it, it does, you know, give them something to look forward to throughout the week. As you approach, though, the final design challenge where the students actually do their testing and they're improving, you might want to try allotting more time than just an hour, because the students are really going to want to engage in that process. And it's easier if you can let them go through the entire create process fully without having them pack stuff up and put it away, because that definitely could throw your momentum off. So I would say giving them about an hour or so every week it's every other week should be okay. But when you get to that create stage and the improve stage at the end of the process, if you could possibly get a little more time, I think that would really help maintain the momentum of your students. Yeah, networking sessions are really a great idea. Right now, like I said, we are working on our webinars, which are great options. But we haven't really looked at developing more networking sessions, but that is something that's come up a couple of times, so we'll keep that in mind as we move forward. Thank you. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to add them to our to my chat pod. I'm going to stay here for about another minute or so. Hopefully you have completed my webinar survey. Thank you very much. For those of you who are going to be joining us this afternoon, I look forward to working with you again. This should be another great webinar. And if you haven't signed up for any of our other webinars but would like to, I'm going to actually push you guys right now to our register page. This one, if you don't want to, you can just close it, but I wanted to give you access